Superman, a paragon of goodness. Some of the most iconic imagery in cinematic history. Today, I'm going to go through the theatrical screen costumes of the Man of Steel. All the way from the 1950s until today. So, recently, there was the reveal of David Corenswet's Superman costume. So, with Corenswet's Superman suit recently being revealed, I decided to watch some old Superman stuff. I watched the extended edition of the original Richard Donner film with commentary. Really, really interesting stuff. I would recommend it. But today I'm here to talk about costumes. I want to go through the processes of creating the cinematic Superman costumes. There's been a lot of Superman costumes in movies and television and, like designs in animation. So I'm not going to get into the TV stuff because you've got a lot there. You've got a lot of older stuff and a lot of the Dean Cain stuff, which I haven't seen. Smallville, which I haven't seen, although I do want to give that a go. And Superman and Lois, like the Tyler Hoechlin stuff, which is, looks really cool and things like that. But that's a lot to get through in one video. I want to go through today the costumes of George Reeves, Christopher Reeve, Brandon Routh, and Henry Cavill. I always get George Reeves and Christopher Reeve mixed up because obvious. But first, I want to go through the original Superman design as created by Joseph Shuster. This is a quote from Joe Shuster, talking about originally designing the Superman costume from the comic books. This is Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, for those of you who don't know, were the creators of Superman. Jerry Siegel was a writer, Shuster was an artist. Both young, not very well off Jewish kids who recently came to America at the time, and they just had dreams of becoming, strong men, people who could fight back against, their childhood bullies and obviously, bigoted people who were around America at the time. And so they created Superman as this Moses figure to, save them. And, they're obviously the self-insert characters. But a lot went into Superman's design back then. And this is a quote from Joe Shuster. "Let's put him in this kind of costume and let's give him a big S on his chest. And a cape. Let's make him as colorful as we can and as distinctive as we can." So there you go. That's a direct quote from Joe Shuster. I think this came from, a book that he wrote many years after Superman. So the overall look of Superman was based off of three kind of guys. Clark Gable, Harold Lloyd, who I think was a comedian at the time. I'll put pictures of all these guys up. Harold Lloyd does look exactly like Clark Kent. Like, it's one-to-one. If Superman was created before Harold Lloyd, which I know is oxymoronic, but I'm going somewhere, Lloyd would have been cast, I think, as Superman. They look identical. And then finally, Flash Gordon, because Flash Gordon was kind of the superhero before superheroes. The suit was a colourful circus strongman suit, hence the kind of, the undies and the skin-tight kind of stuff and the symbol on the chest. And then the cape was added to provide more action and movement, as said by Jerry Siegel. Siegel wanted more action and movement present in the designs in the comic books, in those original comics, so that's where they came up with the cape. Then you have the iconic Superman pose as he's standing with his hands on his hips. I think even the costume behind me, yes, if you can see the costume there behind the woman, he's actually doing the, hands on hips Superman pose. And that was based off of Douglas Fairbanks in films like Robin Hood. Again, kind of superhero before superheroes type situation where he would stand, with his chest out and the hands on the hips, and, it gives that real heroic kind of a silhouette almost. And there you have it. That's Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's original Superman design, how it was conceived. And I find it to be absolutely brilliant, works of inspiration. It was taken from a lot, as everything is. Everything is taken from something, and, every story is inspired by an experience. And I think combining all of these ideas together, the Flash Gordon, the circus costume, the cape, bringing all of this stuff together to create one, God among men, I think that all that was incredibly interesting and revolutionary for the time. Like, again, Superman is the first superhero. And they had to create this iconic look from the beginning. And they didn't know if it would work or not, but it did. And then it would inspire countless figures. Even to this day, like, you know, characters like Homelander from The Boys is a deliberate parody of that classic look, of that classic kind of, you know, America Man kind of a look. So, that's the original Superman suit. Moving on to the first kind of cinematic Superman costume into the George Reeves era. This is a video about costume design, so I'm not going to speak much on George Reeves' experience as Superman. I know that since that Flash movie last year, people have a lot of opinions on that, and I just don't really want to be a part of that conversation because it's pretty much just vitriol from beginning to end. So I'm not going to speak on that, but I do want to speak on the costume that he wore in those movies. And FYI, I recently watched the Superman versus the Mole Men film from the 1950s. Real B movie, but George Reeves put in a very good performance. So there's not much information I could get about this costume naturally because, you know, superhero stuff was kind of disposable and throwaway at the time. It really wasn't until after the Chris Reeve era. So not much is known about George Reeves' Superman costume because they didn't really think to keep any of that. But it's also extremely simple. It is a silk cape and a knit jersey top, suede boots. Is there anything else? Yeah, tights with stirrups. Like, that's pretty much it. There's very little to this costume. But it's one-to-one from the comic books. That's what it is. Like, it's literally just the comic book costume brought to life. It's something I kind of miss about the older way of creating these things, like the Adam West Batman costume and things like that. And even the Chris Reeves Superman suit. I think people are obsessed nowadays with reinvention. They want to take these characters and they want to morph them and they want to change them. Sometimes it's good just to do a one-to-one adaptation from something that's really good, you know? Like, say, the Batman vs. Superman Batman costume. One-to-one from Frank Miller's comic, and it looks amazing. When you try and just reinvent constantly, you end up with something that's kind of a mess, and sometimes something that's completely unrecognizable. You know, shout out to all those MCU movies. So Reeves would wear a small muscle suit, not really a muscle suit as we would know it today. When I say muscle suit, it's like a little bit of padding on an undershirt to wear underneath, just to puff out the chest a little bit, make the shoulders a little bit bigger and wider, give that comic book kind of big strongman perspective. Back then, you know, superhero actors didn't like do that much in the way of fitness and working out. Obviously you had to be fit because there was no such thing as, like, you know, padding loads of muscles onto it. But you didn't really worry about, you know, getting abs or anything like that. Not the way you would nowadays. Which obviously it's good now that actors do kind of put that extra mile in, sometimes to a detriment, which is a whole other kettle of fish. But I think, yeah, just having the small little muscle suit, just to pad him out a little bit, it works. This suit is just classic 1950s. I mentioned it before, but this suit is just translation from the comic book to the film. And George Reeves fills that out really, really well. So, yeah. There's not much I can really say on this. I'll have a lot more opinions on the other Superman costumes, but this one is pretty much just one-to-one, and that's okay. I don't have a designer's name. I will go back and check, just in case I'm after missing it, because I did a lot of research for this, and I do want to give everybody their proper credit. I don't have a name for the costume designer on George Reeves' suit, but I will see if I can find it, because I do have the names of the costume designers for everybody else. On to Christopher Reeve, his Superman costume. This one was designed by Yvonne Blake, who is pictured behind me. I just threw on my making of Superman, the movie, DVD, and skipped to the part about costume design. So this is Yvonne Blake behind me. I think this was around the 2000s or something. And you've got Jor-El's, Marlon Brando's costume, and Chris Reeve's Superman costume behind her. So that's Yvonne Blake, and I'll share my opinions in a sec. So this is a quote from Yvonne Blake. "The only research necessary was the comic itself. The costume obviously could never be changed. It was a question of reproducing what looked like a pretty silly costume into one that will be worn by an actor that looks attractive and believable to Superman fans." And you know what, Yvonne? I could not fucking agree more, okay? I think that that should be the modus operandi for most superhero media, is translate it from the comic book to the screen, and just, if you're going to make any changes, make it so that it doesn't look objectively silly. And that doesn't mean mute out the colors. That doesn't mean give it a bunch of unnecessary lining and padding. That doesn't mean taking away aspects of the costume. Just, make it form-fitting and, just translate it straight to the screen and take away what looks silly, okay? And just make it a perfect one-to-one translation, which is exactly what she did. This is obviously an incredible costume. Just a little bit of trivia on the making of it. The S symbol are individual pieces sewn together. You can, I'll recommend a great video by Cosplay Chris, who went through the Superman costumes recently and actually wore a replica of the Chris Reeves Superman costume. But the S symbol is a bunch of individual pieces. It's not pieces sewn on top of each other. They cut out each individual color and sewed them all together. And if you look at the back of the costume, like the inside of it, you can actually see where each piece was sewn together. So that's really interesting. You would think that it's just like you cut out the yellow piece and then you cut out the red piece and just put it all on top of the blue undershirt. So, I mean, this is the perfect superhero costume, right? Like, this is next to Spider-Man for the perfect superhero costume. It's Christopher Reeve just filling out it really well. One day I'll go through Christopher Reeve's performance as Superman because it's one of the greatest performances we've had in a comic book movie. I'm struggling to find the words to state how incredible this costume is, and it is just one-to-one straight from the comic books. I love the color, the nice, big, bold, bright colors, the very basic and simple design. It is recognizable. It is just instantly inspires that, kiddie kind of comic booky feeling. It's got the beautiful gold S on the back, or yellow S, whatever you want to call it. The S shape is perfect. The red undies, the yellow belt, the boots. It is just perfection. You cannot get any better than this. You really can't. I don't think you shouldn't even try. You shouldn't even try, okay? And unfortunately they did try to do better. I think, yeah, you should go for different ones with new Superman movies, but you definitely should not try to reinvent the wheel and improve on this, because it's just not going to work. This is the Superman comics brought to the screen, and I'm really glad that we got it in 1978. Because, we're waiting for in my opinion, we're still waiting for the definitive Batman costume, because Batman's my favorite character. We got close with Adam West, but the technology didn't allow for it yet. Closer again with the Tim Burton suits, but Tim Burton didn't give a fuck about Batman, so... Chris Nolan, although I love those movies, he did try the reinvention kind of deal, and while I think it works for that Batman, it's not definitive. BVS got very close, but it's adapting a very specific kind of Batman. So, and the Pattinson suit, again, works for what it's in, but we have not got the definitive Batman costume yet, I think. Not in the way that the Superman costume is. So, yeah, in terms of comic book suit and Superman suits, gold standard right here. Moving on to Brandon Routh. So this was designed by a woman named Louise Mingenbach. I apologize if I mispronounced that name, because I do like this costume. So, Louise Mingenbach, and here's a quote from her. "The thing about this suit is that it's so simple. It's nice to have some things that kind of give a little something to look at, which is why we printed this suit with a little bit of a texture. Why we did this seam on the trunks, why we gave texture to the S, why we gave texture to the cape." So, that's a pretty inoffensive quote, I think. I like how she was like, we're going simplicity with this. Like, we're bringing it back to basics. The this is a simple costume, and she just wanted to add a little bit of texture for the kind of the changing of the times, basically. There are more quotes from her talking about the suit, which I don't agree with, but we'll get there. But yeah, I have no problem with that quote. I think the idea of keeping it simple but detailed in the littlest ways is a good way to approach it, especially in the modern era. So she removed the yellow S on the back because, if you don't know, Superman Returns is a direct sequel to Superman 2. So you can kind of set this in the Chris Reeve universe, although most people don't. This movie is whatever you want it to be, okay? Most people treat this movie like it doesn't even exist, largely due to the filmmakers involved, but we won't talk about that today. So there was a lot of changes, like removing the yellow S on the back. Tragedy. We still haven't gotten it back, and I don't think Karen Sweat's suit is going to have it, unfortunately, but one day it'll be brought back. So the reason why she removed the yellow S is because it ends up looking like this weird thing on the back. And that's the only quote I could find about that. Well, you know what, Louise Mingenbach, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, I highly disagree with that point, and I'm not going to say anything that is offensive to her, but yeah, I like the gold S. Okay, in all seriousness, I get your point, Louise, but I do highly disagree with it. I think it is so iconic. Like, you know, in The Dark Knight Returns, I'm not sure is it in the comic, but it's in the movie, when Superman is introduced, and it's just the pan up from the boots to the cape, and then it stops on the yellow S on the back, and it's like, icon. You know, I that's what I really like about it, but I see her point. So they got the texture, this is just kind of a funny anecdote, I think. They got the texture for the costume using a method called, another method, it's a type of spandex called milliskin. And it's this kind of like stretchy stuff that if you stretch it out, you can actually see right through it. And if you hold it up to the light, you can. But it just looks like this kind of textured fabric when it hugs the body. And Mingenbach compared it to women's pantyhose. So now when you're watching Superman Returns, or if you see Brandon Routh in that really nice looking Superman suit, just remember, he's just wearing panties all over. So the cape was made out of milled wool with a latex base. I'm guessing that's why it gives this kind of plasticky look to it. And I don't mind the cape. It's a little bit dark as compared to the rest of the costume, but yeah, it's a good cape. Then the chest emblem was made out of urethane, which is basically a method then that they just used for the rest of the comic book movies. A lot of comic book costumes nowadays is made out of this flexible urethane, which is, it's basically just a flexible kind of rubbery, plasticky kind of a thing. If you look at Henry Cavill's Superman suit, which we'll get to, and if you look at, you know, Ben Affleck's Batman costume, a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe costumes use urethane to create a texture. It's just this very easy to mold and flexible substance. They used it a lot for the Batman costumes as well, although it was way less flexible back then. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much a done method now. While I do like this costume a lot, I think the colours are nice and bold, albeit maybe a little bit dark. I like the simplicity of it, and I like how it's kind of an updated thing. I know people make fun of the S's being on the soles, and yeah, like, you're right, but are you really going to notice that when watching the movie? Like, the rest of the suit is not nearly as busy as that. Like, it's pretty simplistic, especially by today's standards. Like, you want to talk about busy, like, this isn't even the busiest looking Superman costume as of a few days ago. So, yeah, I mean, get over the S's being on the soles. There's never a shot of, like, squarely the soles. Or at least if there is, there's only, like, one or two. Although the S being on the belt, I do agree that's, like, too much. You should really only have, like, one S on that profile. Yeah, otherwise, it's a good costume. I like it. Brandon Routh fills it out really well. I thought he was a really excellent Superman. And luckily he was given a second chance with Crisis on Infinite Earths, but yeah, I think his Superman is really awesome. Henry Cavill. So, this is the touchy subject when it comes to Superman, isn't it? And there is a lot to talk about here, mostly because Henry Cavill, one, his movies came in an era where behind the scenes stuff is like pretty public now because of the internet, and also, well, for another thing, because of how controversial these movies are. and then also because there's just so many things that he's been in. So there's a lot to get through. And also, like, Chris Reeve had 4 movies, but the suit didn't change. Like, if there were, like, obviously they probably did make a new suit for each one, but they never changed it. It always looked the exact same pretty much throughout, except in special cases like Superman 3, where they just darkened it a bit basically, but it's all the same method. Whereas Henry Cavill had basically a different costume entirely in each film that he's in. So this costume was designed by Michael Wilkinson. Here's a quote from him. "We wanted our Superman to glow on screen, to create a texture that the camera loves." So it's weird how there hasn't been there's no like super long quote about the design process, at least not that I could find. But I guess this suit is so new that it's gonna take a while, and also it's like way less iconic than the other ones that people don't really care as much about what the costume designer thinks. They're just gonna throw their opinion at the world instead of looking into all this. So I guess that's why he doesn't have much of a quote. But I did try to find something, and I tried to give him a bit of credit for designing what I think is a pretty cool suit. And what he's talking about there is that there was a chrome base underneath the fabric that they used. So if you look at certain shots of Superman, it looks like he's shiny, like on the suit. That's because there is actually a chrome underneath this thin blue fabric. And that's the idea of making him glow. And I actually quite like it. It looks kind of uniquely alien almost. I do love the kind of Geiger-esque inspirations for the Zack Snyder Superman kind of costumes and the overall design of the Kryptonian stuff. Yes, I know Dick Rockets, but like that's Geiger, that's the kind of design that they're going for. So I really like it, and I love how it does look uniquely alien and less American. So the chest emblem is urethane. That's pretty obvious. It's a pretty thin urethane, and I quite like it. As a Superman symbol, it's good. It's not amazing. I think it's way less iconic and way less recognizable as an S. Although it's not the worst for that. Looking at you, Kingdom Come, but I do like it. It's classic kind of urethane S, and I love drawing it. Actually, it's a really fun one to draw. You can argue all day about like the depth in the Zack Snyder superhero movies. I don't mind it. I think it's fine. I think the idea of getting all up in arms about it is kind of stupid because it's all such obvious kind of references. But either way, I quite like this. For Batman vs Superman, Wilkinson put a quote on the chest emblem that is supposedly in Kryptonian. I'm not sure is there like an official Kryptonian language like Klingon or Elvish, but I'd like to think there is. But either way, it's a quote from Heart of Darkness. "Where we had thought to stand alone, we shall be with all the world." Now that quote is like really it's kind of just like a quote to just throw at the screen, isn't it? Like it's kind of, I feel like they just thought it sounded deep and they probably put it on there for the sake of it. But either way, I don't mind it. I think it's kind of cool that you have a little quote inscribed on the S. I like how it kind of reinforces the idea that it's not actually an S. It's a Kryptonian symbol. So for the Snyder Cut, they shot it with the red and blue Superman costume, but in editing they recolored it to the black and silver, which is for one like a reference to the the Death of Superman comic book, where when Superman comes back, he wears the black suit to absorb solar radiation, and you can kind of see that that's what he's doing in the Snyder Cut as well, when he flies up to the sun and soaks it all in. And yeah, I imagine a lot of it as well just, oh well, it's a black suit, and we love a black suit, don't we? We all just love the black version of whatever superhero costume it is. Like we did it with Spider-Man as well. It is cool to wear for a little bit and then go back to the red and blue, the classic. So yeah, I mean, I like it, and I don't notice the fact that it's been recolored in editing, which is good. I mean, I would have preferred if they just shot it with the black suit. But I can understand just recoloring it in editing and making that choice, and it is not really that noticeable, so I don't mind it at all, and I do like the design of it. So yeah, I mean, I like it. I think people get way up in arms about like why it's there, and it's just the thing about Zack Snyder movies is that people, and I'm talking about both sides of the fandoms here. I'll get into this in another video about the whole Zack Snyder controversy and stuff. Just leave the man alone, okay? He's been through a lot, and just let him move on with his life, okay? But I think a lot of people try to, like, get up in arms about whether or not something is a good choice or a poor choice, and it's one of those things where if it was any other filmmaker and any other type of film, no one would actually give a fuck. So I like this suit a lot. I like the symbol. I really like the texture. Again, it's got that kind of alien kind of a look. I think the blue needs to be broken up a bit more, or maybe I'm just a fan of the undies, but maybe if you just made the yellow belt a little bit more clear, it would have broken up a bit more. And it's my same issue with the Supergirl suit from The Flash. You know, it's a cool suit, but there's too much blue at the bottom. You need to break it up a bit more with the red. Not to say that she needs the skirt or anything, but even just do the little kind of like undies thing, or make the red boots a little bit higher up or something like that. And it's my same kind of criticism with the Man of Steel, like the Henry Cavill Superman costume. It's heavy on the blue. And then in terms of like the colors, I think Batman vs Superman kind of nailed the color of it. It was too muted and dark in the Man of Steel movie, and in the Joss Whedon Justice League, it's like way too bright. But BVS kind of nailed it with the color. It's like a little bit dark, but mostly when the light hits it, it's that bright blue and red. And I really like the cape as well. The long kind of, you know, fabric-y cape. It's no secret that Zack Snyder likes making these heroes feel more like gods than men, which is a perfectly fine take on these characters. But that's kind of the reason for like the big long flowing capes blowing in the wind, is it gives them that godly kind of a look, which I think works really well for those movies. It's not a shock to say that the Superman costume, and specifically the Superman symbol, is one of the most recognizable in history. Like, I tried to look up some proper statistics, but I couldn't really find a good one. But I do know that in terms of like most recognizable logos, it's like the Christian Cross, McDonald's, and Superman. Like, Superman is a character that is recognized the world over. Everybody knows Superman. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we have such varying different costumes from him. Like, you know, the George Reeves, which is just a perfect translation, or an exact translation at least. The Chris Reeve, which is like basically just the comic book on the screen. Then you have ones like, you know, the Man of Steel suit, which is more kind of like a reinvention and kind of a different look, and kind of taking one aspect of the Superman character and exaggerating it. And I think they all definitely have a place, and they're all really good in their own ways, and they all have their own faults as well, except the Chris Reeve suit. That one's kind of perfect. And I guess I'll just end this video with my thoughts on the look at David Corenswet's Superman suit. Everybody's been saying this, and I may as well repeat it here. It's not a very good look at the suit. Like, if we had a shot of him standing up with good lighting, or even in motion, I think we'd be able to have a better opinion on it. There, you can see the unnecessary lines very clearly taken from the New 52, which I don't like. I don't like the symbol. I know that there's kind of two sides to that one as well. I don't like it. I think it's just doing the Kingdom Come for the sake of they haven't done it yet. I would have preferred the classic symbol. I'm very happy about the red trunks. It seems that it definitely has it, so good on them, I guess. You did it. Pat yourself on the back, James Gunn. You gave him the trunks. I like Corenswet's hair. I think it's good. I think the cape looks fine. You know, it's fine. It's passable. Which, people are kind of hyping this movie up to be like the new definitive Superman movie. Like, if the quality of the movie matches the quality of this Superman suit, this movie is going to come and go. It's going to be fine. I don't know how good James Gunn is going to be handling a character like Superman, because James Gunn has made very kind of sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek kind of movies. That's why he takes these characters that are not very popular, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, or like the really obscure members of the Suicide Squad, like Peacemaker. He's very good at doing that tongue-in-cheek, kind of sarcastic, like, look at how silly this is kind of approach. And that's not going to work for Superman. Superman needs the sincerity that comes with this legacy. with something like the Guardians, you can do that kind of silly tongue-in-cheek approach, but it's not going to make for a very good Superman movie. So I don't know. Maybe it'll be amazing. I'm skeptical. Okay. With that being said, what's your favorite Superman suit? Let me know in the comments below. Do you prefer the Man of Steel look, or do you prefer the Chris Reeve look? It's got to be the Chris Reeve look, right? Or tell me if you like the Tyler Hoechlin suits or Brandon Routh's one from Crisis on Infinite Earths. I love the Brandon Routh suit from Crisis on Infinite Earths. But let me know your thoughts, and yeah, be nice about the Zack Snyder interpretations, please. Just be nice, okay? Be civil, and let's have a healthy debate in the comment section. Leave a like in this video if you liked it. I love doing these kind of researched videos, going in depth behind the scenes on movies and stuff, and those videos seem to do quite well, so I hope this one follows that. Subscribe for more videos like this one, and I hope you all have a really great day.